call to order. We'll start with roll call.
Rushmeyer. Schaefer.
Yes.
Scheit.
Here.
Miller.
Yes. And the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving on to the approval of the agenda.
Oh, so moved.
Seconded.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the agenda, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. The agenda is approved, and we'll move on to the consent calendar. Notice to the public, all matters listed are considered routine by the board and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless good cause is shown prior to the time the board votes on the motion to be adopted by roll call.
Move to approve.
Second.
Seconded by Rushmeyer. We have a motion and a second on the consent calendar. Please call the roll.
I have a question
Oh,
real quick.
yeah.
Didn't we say at the last meeting that we were going to do all permits as an agenda item, or was that just alcohol?
Alcohol.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Go ahead.
Motion and a second. Let's call the roll.
Rushmeyer.
Here.
Schaefer.
Yes.
Scheit.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes, consent calendar is adopted, and we will move on to unfinished business. Update on the skate park match information.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the agenda item, just recapping some of the conversation that we've had with the skate park so far, as well as the grant program that they have available to them. Talking with the mayor, there's a potential that the newer warming house restroom pavilion facility that was built in 2022 would be an eligible grant match expense. So adding that into the total, it gets you roughly to an eligible grant match of about $960,000 with the skate park's goal of $1 million. If the park board is amenable to it, we can request that the staff would be applying for the state's grant funding program with those matches in mind, once we get more details from the state on what that process would be.
Thank you, Jesse. Dave?
Yeah, so from what I'm gathering from this is that I think it is getting pushed back onto discussions about potentially shifting the process a little bit. So it may potentially still be open right now, but it sounds like it's going to be something that is going to be talked about here in this next session. And then we should have something this fall in hopes of it being either the following year or the year after that in terms of actual execution of it. But approving of this is probably good now, even if it isn't until later, just so that you're prepared when it does become available, so you don't have to fall back and get approval on it then.
Thank you for the context, Mr. Mayor. Any questions of staff on the grant or anything else? Sure.
One. Jesse or maybe Dave, how would asking the skate park to match or to contribute the $21,000 work? Would they donate that to the city or just?
So that would be a discussion that we would have with the Skate Park Association on what their budget goals are for the project versus what they would be willing to contribute. If they're willing to contribute towards the project, they can donate dollars to the city for a specific purpose, and we can utilize those dollars towards the project.
Cool. So we could work with the skate park.
Yes,
Because it sounds like there's maybe 6 or 8 months at least. Awesome.
Yeah, and it did sound like they already had pretty close to that dollar amount available. So I think we're kind of winning a lot here, Dave.
Yeah, and the question at hand is about what dollars would be needed for matching. There may be a shifting in dollars needed, but what we're hearing is that the stuff that we have will get us to what we're looking for, and then it's just a matter of whether we actually even need that. So, but yeah, definitely in terms of the dollars coming from them, that can just be transferred over. Because the city would have to apply for it. It is the city that needs to apply for it.
Troy?
Mayor Bedeau, is that because the property is actually the city's and not the, it's not run by the park board?
Well,
Why?
well, park board being the city, yeah. So the park board applying would be the same thing as the city, but I believe the specific grant requires government agency to do so.
Sure.
I would like to see them put towards the 20,000, just because they do have it, and then they're like, I know they're working really hard to raise the money, but then also that's just like their first step towards the project financially.
Other questions about the grant, the process, comments? I think we are, do you need a motion from me for direction to approve for the grant? Yeah. Oh, you did. Let's do it.
Jesse, do you think we could ask the skate park, right, it's just a mostly concrete structure, as we're looking at our 30-year plan for the budget, what the maintenance would be like? I'm hoping concrete lasts a really long time, but, right, in terms of funding $1 million, I don't want to get it built and then not be able to fund to maintain it.
I'd say for the most part, the maintenance will be pretty low. Again, that's kind of why this grant program was crafted with concrete only. I don't think they wanted, I'll call them subpar materials, so that you were going to have to come back to it in 5-10 years to do major rehab. So I believe the maintenance of it would be pretty minimal. Hopefully we can obviously protect it from that issue and any damage that way. But from just life expectancy of a concrete set of ramps and stuff like that, it should be minimal except for maybe crack sealing.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, the majority of my conversation with this organization was about that. And their goal with these is to have it be something that is sustainable on its own. But their interest in Brainerd specifically is because of the organization that they have that's put into place. So the hope would be in this, that this skate association or the skateboard group that's putting this together would then be continuing their work as well. Not saying that that's necessarily going to continue for 20 years, but let's say you have some kind of minor issue with a chunk of concrete that comes off. The hopes in this is that there's a stable environment for it as well, which is why they want government agency, obviously, because then there's, we're not going anywhere. But yeah, the main goal with the concrete is that because it is such low maintenance, and the goal being 25 years at minimum, so.
Cool.
I have one more.
Head try.
I just want to make a comment. I think it'll be great that we won't have to have a discussion about putting signs up for no skateboarders here. And Carrie, was that a motion that you made? The 20,000? Along with the staff recommendation or not?
I was just commenting.
Oh.
If I need to make a motion, I sure can. Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't sure.
But I can make that into a motion.
Do you need a motion, Jesse?
I think I would appreciate an action from the board that kind of authorizes staff or directs staff to go this direction.
Alrighty. Then we will look for a motion to approve the exploration of the state's grant funding program for the State Park project.
Is that your motion?
No, we're just looking for one.
I would like to make a motion to approve this with the side note that the skate park provides the $20,668.
Second. Rushmeyer?
As far as comments are concerned, I think the idea would be, ideally, if it came back, we'd want the Skate Park Association to contribute whatever the remaining amount of money that isn't covered by the grant. I think we're all kind of in agreement with that. We don't really want to kick in any extra cash. So whether it's 20,000 or whether it ends up being 250,000, we'd probably prefer that the association covers the remainder from whatever the grant doesn't cover, would be my comment. So I understand 20,000 and all this is just an estimate until we know exactly what the grant, when, all of that sort of thing. But I do think, just given our direction, that we'd probably not to kick in any cash from the capital budget for a project like this as well. So I think, 20,000 or I guess an amendment to that would be whatever the remainder from the grant money is. But again, I think we're just looking to apply for the grant and then go from there. But comment from Dave.
Yeah, so I think we need to have clarification on, because does that also mean that if there is no need for the matching funds, do you need that money as well? Because that would be the question I would have with that. Are you looking for just the remainder, or are you looking for a specific dollar amount? Because if the motion is for a specific dollar amount, then it needs to be a specific dollar amount. But if you're, like Jonathan is saying, if you're expecting it to be more or potentially less, I would try to make your motion a little,
Specific.
or
Less specific,
less
yeah, I
specific.
suppose.
Okay. Yep. Okay, so I will amend my motion to say, I make a motion to approve the investigation or looking into this matching grant, and with the possibility of having the skate park contribute if needed to make the match possible at $1 million. Does that sound okay?
Still second.
All righty. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the application for the grant? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. We are looking for a grant. Moving on to new business. The discussion of the draft for the agreement for the ski loons. Jesse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Included in the packet was a red line version of the draft agreement that the ski loons had proposed at the last meeting. I wanted to make sure that it was a red line version so you can kind of see the changes that I'm recommending based on comments that I had heard at the public hearing. I took a handful of notes as well as the emails that were received prior to that meeting. So taking some of those different considerations, we came up with this. I'll just quick summarize some of the high points of the changes. One is limiting to a 3-year agreement, just to start with, rather than a 5-year term, as was proposed. The storage of the dock. It's worked in the back bay in the past as well as our fishing dock. I think this just gives us flexibility that if it doesn't, we can flex that into different spots. The changing of the starting time from 5:45 to actually start the practice to 6 o'clock, that they do have the grace of 15 minutes ahead of time to kind of prepare themselves. I did clarify this because it was stated in his Chris Denz's letter that was provided to them that was something that they were amenable to. So we included that. One big piece, one big change in here was the performance standards. There really wasn't anything that I had seen in here that addresses if we have concerns about how we want them to operate in the lake. And this is something that the work group established very clearly between both the sheriff's office as well as the city attorneys. We do have a say in how the operations do occur on the lake and addressing some of those concerns there. So with that, I wanted to include those in here. This gives us a little bit of something to fall back on if they aren't meeting those performance standards, that we can consider those violations. I'll actually just continue here really quick. The portable storage unit that they were proposing to bring into the park, we had some concerns about that, especially with matching our park's design standards. We do have a small storage shed that I sent you photos of. Those kind of generally meets the color scheme of the parks. So we could use that and provide that to the ski loons instead. It would give them a storage unit. We did include a requirement that the ski loons would coordinate and meet with the Rice Lake residents at minimum once per year prior to the season, kind of just prepping for the season, talking about commons concerns. So I elaborated some language in there for that. Clarification on mediation terms, as well as adding a termination clause that would allow us to terminate the clause should either party wish to do so. After the packet was published, the ski loons did reach out to me. We had a discussion on Monday regarding some of the red line changes that we had in here as proposals. Something that they would want to see is maybe some modifications to the performance standards, performance expectations, or the, how did I state that? It was that operations statements to allow them for a little flexibility on like the hot pickups they do where they come down and pick up skiers off of the dock, off the end of the dock. So giving more flexibility specifically in the park area, not elsewhere that you saw in the exhibit. And then just kind of anytime that those are going to be those parallel operations, that they're going to be limited mostly to the park area and not elsewhere. So that was just a couple comments that I'd received from them. I did try and draw this out the best I could, just give everybody kind of a visual representation of what the 250 feet does represent. The goal was that we're trying to limit most of the parallel speeding operations within that riparian area and keep that more out towards the center. If they have to operate in that area indicated in red there, that 250 feet, that most of that is really for launching from the dock and to and from, keeping it more parallel to shoreline to try and keep that wave action away from the shoreline as best as possible. And then just obviously understanding if you have to be in that area to try and be respectful, lower your speed. But in talking with them, I don't think that they had too much concern with that overall in their operations. But with that, these are the comments that I had put in here as my recommendation. What I'm really looking for is comments and thoughts from the park board on what they'd like to see, changes from this. And then from here, I'll take that, put together a proposed draft and send those out to both the ski loons as well as the city attorney for further review. Our intent is that we would bring I'll call it a final draft to the next park board meeting that after those discussions have been had.
All right. Thank you, Jesse, and staff for all the hard work on this one specifically. It was a lot of comments and a lot of work on putting something together that we think is relatively close. So, comments and questions for Jesse on the draft?
I have
Sure.
many, so buckle in, I think. And the reason I say that is, starting out right off the top, first of all, who drew this up?
The original one without the red line was the one that the ski loons had provided to us.
Okay, and who made the revisions? You know,
The red lines are from myself.
yourself. Thank you, because coming from a person who's drafted, created, revised many, many standard operating procedures and contracts, this is a lot of work, so thank you for doing that. I just want to make some comments before, I would hope we would go through this whole thing, because there's things on here that I have issues with from top to bottom, and I would like to address. First being, the very first line out of term of agreement to go for 3 years. I have a really hard time with that, since we've had a ton of issues every single year. Why would we all of a sudden jump to 3 years and just expect it all to be okay? And the contract good for 3 years. I would like to see it be 1 year until we have something that's working and there's proof that we're not having the issues and problems that we've had basically every year since before this. So I would like to see this be 1 year, as it always has been, until there's some proof. I mean, to me, this is crazy to go from, I mean, look at all the money or all the time we spent on this just since last August. And now all of a sudden, we're gonna put a red stamp on it to say, and I'm not, Jesse, you just wrote in something, so I'm not, so I think 1 year is a better option than just to say 3 years and we'll come back in 3 years and look at this. That's too long, I think. Do you want to go line item by line item on this, on the revisions?
Yeah. Whatever comments you
Okay.
have on it. This is
I
a
looked
full
it over.
discussion. So.
Let's see here. safe working conditions, line 2E. I think this is the dock and the stairs. We had pretty thorough discussion with the city attorney on this. Those stairs, we will be liable if somebody gets hurt on those stairs. So I think they need to meet requirements before any season even starts. And if something happens between now and then during the season, and if something happens to those stairs and they're not working, I think they should be fixed prior to any further. I mean, the city attorney boldly, I mean, he came right out and said, if something happens on those stairs, and they're pretty sketchy, if something happens on those stairs, the city could be liable for that. So I think it would be better suited if something happened, if those stairs fail in any way. First of all, they should be up to whatever building. I don't know if there's a code for stairs on a lake, but if there is, they should match that. And then kept to that, maintain it at that level. But I don't think we should give 30 days. It takes one day for one person to step off a bad stair and hurt themselves pretty bad, and then the city is on the hook, according to the city attorney. Sorry, this is much easier when it was in red. Let's see. The other part is, nowhere in here do I see a number of days that they can operate. I read all of the emails from people supporting and not supporting the ski loons, and there's a ton of people supporting them. And I see why. I think I brought this up before. I've coached kids for 20 plus years, and it's important to have things for kids to do, and it's a good program. But, I don't think everyone who responded has a full scope of what's been going on over the last years. And we have a DNR specialist, I think retired now, who made a comment that this is eroding the shoreline on the lake quicker than would be otherwise. I was thinking one day, I did hear from the association, the Rice Lake Association, they might be okay with 2 days, but 4 days I think is tremendous. I mean, they've had to put up with 4 days for how many years? I think we start at 2 days, and at some point they have to look to other lakes to make some of their practices happen. If they have 2 days, there should be plenty of time for them to work the show, the little details of the show. And they've been doing it a long time. So, one, I think 4 days and or 3 days is too many, especially when we're looking at renting kayaks. If you go out on the lake in the evening and with the sun at a certain spot, kayaks are not real visible. And even if you have a spotter, it could very easily, someone get hurt on the kayak by the boats. And my proposal is we don't allow kayak sales during their practices. It's just, it's 3 hours, but one person getting hurt might be too many. Again, it's, kayak at your own risk, I get that, but, I don't know how many boats they have going at one time, but maybe we can have something that says, stay in that red area when you're kayaking during these hours. I don't know, it just seems like another sign we'd have to put up, but I think we should start at 2 days and not 3 or 4, and 3 days per week on Mondays. I mean, that's a tremendous amount of time, especially if we have erosion on a small lake that, we have an expert that's telling us this is definitely enhancing the erosion of the lake. We also have to take that into account. Ski loons will not interfere with the riparian rights. Some of this to me is, I think it said 250 feet. 250, 300. I mean, if they stay in that, all I'm saying is, in the past, we have video proof to show that that hasn't happened, and we got to make sure that it does. I'm glad that we have something on there that shows that, but it sounded like staff was concerned about having a portable shed there for them. What, is that the case, Jesse?
It was more of a concern of, is it going to match what we have for a parks design standard? We wanted something that kind of matches the different facilities that we have.
Would that just be set on blocks, or?
We would find a way to get the one that we're proposing to provide. We would find a way to place that in a manner that blends in. We don't want it to stick out.
That second picture in there looked like the Taj Mahal. That's not an option, right?
It doesn't look like that anymore.
Next year's capital budget.
And then the ski loons meeting with the Rice Lake Association, I think that is fantastic. And I think both organizations need to come into that with a mindset of compromise and a mindset of, listen, we know this is good for the kids. We know this is good for our community. We also have lakes. We live on a lake, and we have some riparian rights that we'd like to have followed. And I'm just going to say it, unfortunately, and I think I've said this before, 3 years ago, I made a comment, this is like the Hatfield McCoys. You know, somebody's going to get hurt, and that's my biggest fear. Somebody's going to get hurt. You know, maybe some fishing boats go out and block the skiers or whatever it is. And the skiers now are starting to come closer to the docks because they're mad. And next thing, I guarantee you what'll happen is a kid will be the one to get hurt. And then we'll all be shaking our heads like, what the heck are we doing? But I think safety's got to be our top concern. The erosion of the lake, you know, we're going to start sending kayakers out there that are paying a fee to go out on the lake. Is it a good time to do that while they're practicing? My thought is no, but I think there's another thing with the ramp, 30 days, again, if the ramp is deemed something wrong with it, maintenance-wise, I think those things, I think any safety feature, if it's broken, if it's not working, if it's not safe, that the practices should cease until it's fixed. And I think that'll get fixed pretty quickly if that's the case. And, you know, again, one person getting hurt is one too many. Because I know people use that dock, for instance, when there's no shows going on, and, you know, one person steps off there and breaks a leg, breaks a back, you know, smacks their head, ends up handicapped, who knows, it happens. They have to get fixed right away. I can pause and let anyone else speak as well, but I think those are my main concerns, is the number of days that the agreement is still yearly until we see some improvement on the actions between the two groups. And because let's face it, I know it's been hard on, I think all of you are probably lake owners, and it's been hard on the people whose kids go to ski loons, and, you know, they love it. And you both have, you know, we can understand where you're both coming from. But it's also been hard from a park board standpoint to field this same kind of discussion every year. So hopefully through a new contract, less days, held to more accountability on safety, and meeting with you guys, and both of you coming together with some compromise, that, you know, the world's not perfect, and we can't have everything. And, you know, I think these meetings are great, and I like I think they have to happen at a certain date, and the questions have to be, and answers given to the park board, or how the, you know, meeting minutes, so to speak. But and then the only other part of that is I want to make sure, you know, this is our contract, not the ski loans, right?
Yeah, this is what we're.
We write up the contract. And
Right, yeah,
they
we-
either agree to it or they don't.
Yeah, so the initial idea of this was to have them bring something that on a, like even on a national level, since they're part of the organizations on a national level, what do the other contracts look like across the country, right? Like what do other water sports shows have? And then start that as a shell and then build off of feedback from the public hearing and, you know, certain situations that, or hurdles that our specific city and park system have, and then build a contract out from there, right, with feedback from the community as well. So that was the original design of it, right? So we had them bring something that is more of a standard contract for water sports shows, and then to build on it for our specific situation.
I'll yield for anyone else who wants to speak.
Other comments in between, yeah.
All right. Lost a lot of sleep over this. But I appreciate everyone's feedback on both sides. So, Troy, I actually agree a lot with you on a lot of things you said. I also agree that we should just look at 1 year, and if it goes well, maybe we look at 3 years from there, but jumping to 3 years, I think is a bit much. The usage. So it's pretty much dead set on them only doing their shows there, right? But to have a successful show, they do need to practice on their lake. So I would say 2 days, and I want them to designate the days that they are on there. So like Tuesday, Wednesday, they're gonna be on the lake, and they're gonna be out there from 6 to 9 or whatever the law is that they have to be off. That way then, the residents and the public, right, we're like creating this awesome new beach, the kayakers as well, they'll know that they can be safe or they can use that space. I want them to have a successful show, so obviously practicing on the lake is important. So 2 days with the designation of which days. And then the last thing I had was just the wrap-up. So line 6, 7D that you added in. So you said meet with the homeowners, but I would like to see a wrap-up at the end of the season too then. Just to have,
And I think that's a great idea.
just to see where things ended, but that's it.
Chair next. Sure. I think I was just kind of disheartened leading up to the February meeting. Mr. Dens had been very insistent on talking in advance of that meeting about how we could be really successful and collaborative. And we talked the Sunday before the meeting, and then the next day, I learned about a Facebook post from the ski loon saying the park board's threatening to cancel all of the practices and shows, and I felt like I was a little disingenuous to the day before a feedback and brainstorming session to say, hey, actually they're threatening to take everything away, even though the ski loons had already provided a contract for us to review and discuss. So I felt like that really didn't get this process off on the best foot, and I was just disappointed when we look at to Troy's point, right, the stakes of this, that there's people on boats water skiing at high speed, and to not really be sure if I can even trust what the executive of the organization is saying. It makes me a little worried that I don't know if we can trust them following some of the details in this contract. But specifically about the contract, a couple new things. I think if it gets to mediation, I would like to see the ski loons take on that cost and not have that be a burden for the city. I'd also like to prohibit vehicles in the park, especially as we're doing the beach and the shade structure and all that renovation over this summer.
I didn't realize they were doing that in years past. They're driving up into the park. I didn't realize that. I agree. I don't think they should not be allowed to drive up in. I mean, we're not letting them go into Gregory Park. We're not letting it do in other parks.
Right, like I think it needs to be a very specific situation where we allow vehicles, like, Arts in the Park or something. I think I generally agree, Troy and Kara. I think 3 days is fine. I would like those fixed days. If it's 2, I can certainly compromise on that. To your point about the steps, Troy, there is already an indemnification section. I think if we could just add the steps there.
According to the city attorney, if they're on the city property, we could still be, there still could be some liability toward the city there. That was the only part he said, the steps. So the steps, in my perspective, after meeting with the city attorney, they need to be up to whatever code there might be for steps on a lake, and I don't know what that is, but, I've walked down them, and it's like, I hope I don't fall, but, you know, I'm not 20 anymore. I think they need to be, I think anything that's a safety maintenance issue that's recognized and brought to our attention, should have to be fixed immediately, not 30 days. I mean, that's that's a third of the season. And if it happens halfway through the season, that could be, they don't have to fix it until the end of the season. I would even compromise and say 7 days, but, I mean, 30 days is a long time to have a feature be unsafe, you know, so. Part of this, I'm going back to my lockout, takeout years of maintenance. I mean, it's, you know, something isn't working, you take it out for a reason, because one person could come up and next thing you know, you have a bad injury, and so.
Just a couple other things. I think a year makes sense as we're trying to nail this down. I would love to find a longer term solution because I think this is, at this point, actively taking away from other priorities we have as a park board. So I would like a longer term contract. I don't know if that makes sense for us right now with where things are at. And I like your idea, Kara, of the 2 meetings starting the end of the year. That's what I got.
Very good. Follow-up comments?
Again, I think Andrew brings up a great point is, you know, we all do this with our kids, and when they aren't doing what they're supposed to do, you know, it's a trust factor, and we've seen over several years leadership of the ski loons having in his mind the thought that on the lake nobody can tell us what to do, and they've taken advantage of that. And I think that's really where the biggest dysfunction of this whole thing has been. But I'll leave it at that.
Comments?
Are you interested in my thoughts?
I am interested, yep. I think we all
I
are.
have lots of thoughts. Yeah, Troy, I think you're right about the steps for sure. That is, you know, if we're gonna put that on them, then it needs to be put on them, and it needs to get taken care of right away if there's any issue with it. And I would take that as far as anything. You know, if they're the ones putting the shed in there, that shed should be fixed immediately. You know, so I definitely appreciate that. I don't have a problem with a longer contract. I'll just be honest with you, I'm tired of talking about this. So I want to figure out how we get to a point where we're not talking about this twice a year, every year. But, you know, we got to get there, right? So the other thing that I had notes of is I'd like to see some kind of lights on the ski jump of some sort. I think we're crazy to not do that. So I'd like to see that happen. The other thing, I don't have a problem with 3 days. I think that's a great improvement from 4 days. I don't dislike the floating days as a compromise. However, I don't like the idea that there is just 7 days in advance. I don't think that's fair to anyone that wants to use the lake. I think if we're, two things. One, if we're deciding what days they should be, I think they should be set. And I think it should be, we have May 1st in here often. I think May 1st, the decision should be made. What days, you know, if you're going to have 1 year contract, that's fine. But if we were doing multiple years, and let's say, okay, year 2, Wednesday doesn't work, Thursday has to work, I don't have a problem with that changing. However, I think that May 1st, we should know what days they're going to be on there, if it's 2, if it's 3, whatever it is. And then I think we definitely have to increase any of those floating days. There's only 4 of them. They should be used for special circumstances. And I think that they should be well in advance, so that anyone else that wants to use the lake, if they've got company or something coming up, you should have a pretty good idea of when that's happening. So I'm not saying that has to happen May 1st, but I do think that it definitely needs to be more than 7 days. I don't think that's fair to other lake users. Other than that, I don't have a ton of problems. I think we do get into a lot of weeds here, which makes me nervous. But I do like that things are drawn out. I do like that there's a pretty good, like you said, right, these are procedures, right? Yeah, and I like that they're drawn out. The other thing I want to do, though, is I want to remove the city from the majority of the infraction type of stuff. I think we need to get this to a point where this is a safety concern. The city should be fair with its contract, the ski lagoon should be fair with its contract, and then it should become a safety concern, more so than anything else. If we're gonna have a contract, we need to be sure that we're, agreeable to what's in the contract. And I just think that some of that, from our standpoint, from a park board perspective, we're not police, we're park board, right? So I want to make sure that we're getting correct things to the correct parties. So I don't know what that means in terms of how that's worded in the contract, but in terms of days, in terms of years, that's on you guys. I think that you guys can make that decision. But I do think you are correct, Troy. The stairs, safety concern, lights on the ramp, I think is a safety concern. And then I just want to make sure that we're being fair in terms of when these days are. I think that people should have a very good idea of when they are. If it's 30 days in advance, if it's, I don't know, 14 days is even enough. But if it's whatever it is, I think that, if they know they've got to get certified, I would assume you know that ahead of 7 days, so.
If I may.
You may.
Agreed on all that, and I guess I have a problem with the floating days, just in the fact that they have 80 kids, and, a lot of the emails that we got were from people outside of town even, and I don't expect this to not continue to grow. And, what if we're up to 160? At some point, I think this association needs to start looking at other lakes to be able to do practices and different things, even if it's just general practices. And, when you're talking about erosion, if everything is on this lake, erosion on the shoreline is gonna continue. Even from 300 feet out, it's gonna get there. And one reason I say that, we were on the pontoon on Rice Lake last summer, and some skiers came by, and they were just skiers, but I think they had two. And it wasn't a huge pontoon, but it wasn't a small pontoon, and it rocked us, heavy. And so, if you're near shore, it's gonna erode that shore. So that's why I'm thinking 2 days instead of 3. And I personally am I don't even think, if they have to get their certification, why can't they do that on another lake? I think it's just been attitude. Ski Loons has gotten everything they wanted, and they've abused that, in my opinion. And I don't want to reward them by just we'll just knock it down to 3 days. In the erosion of the shoreline is my main drive on this. When we have an expert saying, this is beating the shoreline down from the DNR. Wasn't that his words? I believe it was.
Well, the gal was just a conservationist and didn't provide any sort of credentials, just that she was a conservationist. So again, I don't know anything about her personally, professionally. That was just the input received during the public hearing from the conservationist. So I don't know any further than that. Again, I assume she was hired by residents to assess erosion damage along the shoreline. That was the understanding that I received. But again, she didn't provide any credentials or anything like that during that conversation. So, again, not to discount her by any means, but again, she just called herself a conservationist and said that she had looked at the erosion. So, not entirely sure, again, as far as expert opinion, but that's what she provided.
But I think it's telling also that, I wasn't here, but I read the meeting minutes, that the people who were here were asked, how many of you live on lakes? And how many of you would want the ski loons to be on your lake? And only 1 out of 4 raised their hand. Did that happen? It was in the minutes. And
Yeah, I believe we were trying to direct him to address staff because he did turn around.
and I think that's a telling tale of what these guys put up with. And, you know, they want to do it, but they don't necessarily want to do it in their backyard. And I think for good reason, but that's why, I'll be honest, by the end of last year, I was ready to say, let's just quit this, period. Let's not even have anything to do with this. Hearing how many people are into it and want it to keep going, I was willing to say, yeah, let's do 1 day. 2 days, so that's half. That's still half of what they're doing last year and every year. So that's my take. And the other part is the mediation. The city attorney basically said, just write up your contract, and if they break the contract, you were there, just end the contract. So why do we need mediation? And the reason I say that is just what I've been saying, is there's been year after year after year of saying, this is what you gotta do, and they don't do it. So at some point, when do you hold them, say, okay, you know, we went this far again, and you didn't do it, so here we are, end of contract. Why do we need mediation?
And I'm actually in agreement with you on that one. My main comment, apart from a lot of the comments that you guys made, was the mediation side of things. Honestly, I'm just tired of it, and I understand that at the end of the day, you know, people are going to look for proof or things like that, like, oh, well, we didn't do this, or, you know, you can't prove it, whatever. It's one of those things where if we hear the rumblings of that sort of thing, or we have any amount of proof, I don't think I need a Crow Wing County Sheriff's report or something like that to show me that this has happened, because, I mean, it has happened in the past. But I do understand where you're coming from with that. Like, we don't need somebody else. But to the mayor's point, you know, when we're drawing up a contract, you know, we do need to have either, you know, some form where we're getting actual, you know what I mean, on record information.
Yep.
So I think that's the strict part of mediation. But yeah, if we're told,
That the
if we're
contract
told
was-
by the, and I think that's strictly it, right? And whether it's through the Crow Wing County Sheriff or, you know, eyewitness testimony, that sort of thing, that does need to be explicitly laid out before we terminate it. I don't know. For me personally, first, second, third offense, I'm kind of at that same point with you too. You do it once,
Yeah.
that's enough for me. And so that was, apart from your guys' comments, that's one of my main concerns, is that I'm also at the point where first, second, third offense, it's excessive. One time is enough. My main, on a positive comment though, I do like the meeting. Hell, I'll rent the pavilion out every year, as to bring the groups together and have conversation, have a barbecue, whatever it might be, every year. But that needs to happen, needs to occur, needs to happen with the association, needs to be something on the books every calendar year. We probably need the meeting minutes so that we have an understanding what was discussed, so that, you know, when we come back, and yeah, term of contract, 1 year, until we're able to sustain. I like the idea of not having to deal with it, but my whole thing with this entire thing was coming up with some form of compromise in the best way possible. And I think, sitting there for 3 years to know if our experiment worked we can just sign another year agreement if things are going okay. We don't have to have 3 years of things going not really all that great before we just terminate a mid contract again. So I think 1 year reassessment, but following all the terms. And then, you know, taking our comments and feedback for the public on this particular draft. I don't know, again, how you would prefer those types of things to be delivered, because, again, I think we took a lot of the public feedback, and I think the 250 feet was actually specifically asked by the public. So coming up with taking these sort of comments and feedback that we as a board has received from the public as well, and trying to recraft it. I don't know necessarily if there is going to be, you know, if we want to redraft it and then take another look before we do some sort of vote. But I'd also like to maintain the idea that even if we come up with what we think is a fair contract, we don't necessarily have to agree and vote yes. We just need to put forth our best effort. And I think we're pretty close on what would be our best effort. Maybe making these amendments and changes that you guys have mentioned. But there's always still the ability, even with our best effort, of just
There
still
always,
voting no.
there always is.
So-
But, you know, I think Kara's idea of adding another meeting at the end of the year is a great idea.
Yep.
But I think it does need to be redrafted. I think it needs to be redrafted so then we can look at what we get closest to it. And anybody who's done this before will always recognize that it is never a perfect document. You always miss something, but you get it as close as you can get it, and then you go from there. So, you know, next year comes up, you revise it to add the things that you need, or maybe you look at it and say, whew, it's a great year,
Right.
you know?
And so I think with that comment, and I imagine you've taken diligent notes on our feedback, I think I would like to see our next meeting just have another draft. I know it kind of extends it out month to month to month, and not have us vote on it at the next meeting, but come back with changes to the contract and whatever additional feedback's received in between then. Have us, I think in between that time, you can make those adjustments, have and then have it back to us again. I don't know if you guys want it to come back to us in the next meeting or just make the revisions and then attempt to vote at our next meeting, but I guess we're kind of open to that. Because at this point, I feel like this is pretty close to our best effort, and making these changes would be probably our best effort. So bringing it back on our next meeting to vote on would probably be the best, but if you guys want to see another draft of this,
No, I think this is what, like, add the revisions that we've talked about, bring it back, let's talk about it, and then we vote on it. The vote, you know, somebody's motion might say, yes, this contract with this provision.
perfect.
And then we can vote on it and they can add that provision afterwards, but we can vote on it next month.
Yep.
But I think revisions need to be added and then we'll go from there.
Any further comments or revisions you would like for Jesse? So, yeah. Oh, Jesse, let's go.
If you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I'd like to just kind of go through and summarize what the general park works. Obviously, everybody had a chance to comment. So if you hear something as I go through these quick comments, let me know if there's something that I'm missing or you want to see tweaked. So 1-year contract, start at 2 practices per week on fixed days, not floating within the week. It's 2 specific days. No additional floating flexible days beyond that. If there's a safety issue with either stairs or ski jump, they're taken out of service and they're fixed immediately before they're put back into service. Removing mediation. If there's violations, the contract would terminate. A wrap-up meeting after the season completes with the Rice Lake Association. No vehicles in the park, including for shows. And then adding the lights on the ski jump. Am I missing anything, or was anything on that list something that you did not want to see in there?
I think Troy's comment was, if there is a safety issue, we just halt practice. If we have anything. So even if it's taken out of the lake, and removed from an issue, right, they can continue practice, but let's just say the ramp's broken and it's not removed from the lake, can't practice, right? So any sort of safety hazard either needs to be repaired or removed before practice continues. And then on the flex dates, I don't know. I think we wanted to have those resolved by whatever that date where they would meet, right? So I think that would be the idea, is if we want them meeting by a specific day of the year with the association, that the flex dates be resolved by that date. I think that's a fair use of the flex dates. So
Yeah, the only other thing I was thinking is we do have a event procedure You know, so it is possible that they could apply for an event too. You know, I know this is slightly different, but that could be a way of handling it as well. And that, it requires 30 days in advance with a park board approval, so that could be a potential way of doing that as well.
Well, what works for us isn't necessarily what we're aiming to do.
The other event that has to be, is they have to obtain one from the sheriff's department. And they made it clear that if they're violating contract or violating riparian rights out on the lake, they won't give them that.
I was thinking in terms of the flex days, if there was, you know, question with that, you know, beyond, so let's say you say May 1st, and then they come back and say, well, wait a minute, we said May 1st, however, there's this one day, because we had that problem last year. We got this one day. And if that comes up, we do have a process for events, and we close streets. You know, I don't think that this is outside that unreasonably, and there's a process for
I
that.
see what you're saying, yeah, so.
So if you did want to say these flex days have to be in by May 1st, and then they say, well, wait, what if we have something that comes up? And there is something that comes up, you can always come before the park board and ask.
Sure, yeah, so having
Without
an event application submitted,
An application, which is, I believe, 30 days for most of that stuff. 30 days before your event typically.
Well, we want it to be before the park board, so it depends
Yeah.
on when you get it in, but yeah.
Typically, the applications say 30 days before.
Yep.
So.
okay. So that would be a fine adjustment, so we'd like the flex dates to be solidified by the initial meeting, whatever date is set, right? And then if they need to make adjustments, they're placing some form of event application for those flex dates so that it's brought before us and we can have comments. Totally fine. Yeah, I think that's a creative solution to that.
I think, if I may, we just missed one thing. Jonathan Miller will pay for the,
I will, yeah, I got the pavilion
Gazebo and
yeah,
Barbecue.
I'm not buying lunch, but
Oh, I thought you said
I'll pay the somebody else can bring the dogs, but
You'll bring sauce?
I'll bring the sauce. But I'll rent the pavilion, at least for the first year. Because we know it'll happen once, you know, if we vote yes, so. I'll pay for the pavilion on that first meeting, but, the preseason meeting, but yeah, I think that's plenty of amendments. That where if we had to make any adjustments coming into the vote, that they could be pretty narrow, changes.
if we miss something, we miss something. I mean, it happens.
Yep,
It happens
that does
all the
happen.
time.
It's never gonna be a perfect document. I honestly do believe that, given where we were 3 months ago, this is one of our best attempts at making this work. And again, at the end of the day, don't have to vote yes on this. It's still one of those things, but I appreciate everybody's effort in putting in what is our best chance in an agreement. So I think, Jesse, do you need anything further from us?
No, sir, Mr. Chair. I think we could.
Does anyone else have any comments or questions or concerns?
Just a very final comment.
Sure.
I know we're all a little worn out of this discussion. Just as we look at this over the next month, I think us being worn out does bias us in one direction. So just keeping that in mind as we think about the contract and proposal and all that. That's it. Thank you.
Alrighty. So I don't think we necessarily need a motion, right? So at this point, we'll leave it up to staff to make those adjustments, and we'll have a vote on this at the next regular meeting. So we'll move on to the discussion of the location of the Buffalo Hills Lions Playground. Jesse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a follow-up to a 2024 capital budget item, the replacement of the Buffalo Hills Lions Park playground. In meeting with the club, they wanted to put in kind of an accessible play area. One thing that we're doing as part of the process here is we wanted to review the park's master plan to make sure that we were placing all of our facilities and where the park board's kind of established that they want them to be. So in reviewing that, the new location of the playground would essentially be right on top of that loop road that goes kind of right in front of the pavilion there. Obviously that causes a little bit of a challenge though. If we were to place it there and not make any adjustments, it'd be very difficult for people to egress out of the park without having made the adjustments to the parking lot as shown in the master plan. So looking for some direction from the park board on this, I put 3 options here in the packet. One would be to replace the playground in the present location, and then when the playground is due for replacement next time, that location can be looked at further. The Lions Club has mentioned in our quick discussion on this, their intent is not only to install and replace the playground here at this time, but to further in future years, 3-4 years down the road, expand on it. So something to think about with that piece of it. Another option would be to just replace the playground in the location per the master plan and then request the funds from the city council using the long-term maintenance fund that we established last year. And we can do that reconfiguration here in 2024. The other option would be to move the replacement to 2025, relocate to the new location, and then just request 2025 capital funds to redo the parking lot at that time. This also does allow us to keep our eyes open for grant opportunities. They do come up through the year. I know I just got one that came up. I know there's another one that'll come up in September. So it does allow us to evaluate those as they come in. Our recommendation would be to go with option 3. This gives us a little bit more time for working with the Lions Club, finding those grant opportunities to kind of maximize the buck, and then include a more proper number for doing the parking lot as part of that with the 2025 capital budget request.
Thank you, Jesse. Comments on the potential building of this playground this year, next year, movement of the parking lot? Anything for Jesse on this one?
You know I do, but you can.
You know, you can start, Troy. I love it when you kick it off.
Okay, I'll just go over to the map. And looking at this, the plan to move the playground to this spot, perhaps places kids in more danger from foul balls. We're talking about making these beautiful berms, so there'll be a lot of people sitting here and here. If we leave it there, the parents of the kids who are sitting over here, if we leave it at the current spot, might feel a little, well, I can't see my kid, and maybe they will be able to, I don't know. I think you can see through there pretty good, but my thought is, why not move the basketball court in here? You could also put pickleball lines on there if we wanted, and move this back to this location here. Otherwise, perhaps leaving it where it was is maybe the better option. I like the location of it on this design. I just don't know how safe it is for foul balls. And then I think we've done some netting costs for Memorial Park, did we not, for the playground? It was pretty expensive, wasn't it? When we talked about moving the playground over by the, what's the water thing called?
The splash pad.
Splash pad. We talked about, home runs, we're gonna need some kind of netting for safety there, but
I think we were looking at about 50 grand, if I remember correctly.
You're going to put some sauce into a ball to get it into the playground, right? Like that's a home run on the right field.
no,
No, that's, yeah.
no, not here. It would be a foul ball. Foul ball down third baseline from field 1, and a foul ball down first baseline on field 2. Well within reach. When the bigger girls are up there playing, that's well within reach. And I don't know that the basketball court location is out of reach, but it puts it further out of reach than that, I believe. And maybe the current location is the best spot for it.
Yeah, I think that's what's difficult, right, is that the location is there for, to actually maximize use when, the parents and whatever are, either spectating softball or, a part of the game, or one parent's part of the game and the other's sitting. So, yeah, I get it. Probably have to put a little English on it to get it over there, but, it's not an impossibility for it to end up in that spot.
It's not.
Yeah, no, not an impossibility by any means.
It's always English.
Yeah, yeah. That's why they're foul. Yeah. I think as far as the design is concerned, I guess I do wonder how when we're looking at it, you know, I don't know necessarily if this is entirely to scale either. So I do wonder how far back the playground would be from the actual fields themselves in between these berms. So, you know, obviously this looks like it would probably be, you know, 10, 15 feet, but you know, in reality, like how far away from the fencing would we really want it to be? And, you know, yeah, it is an interesting point that you bring up there. Other comments about that, building off of that? Yeah.
Okay, so didn't we talk about getting rid of, like, moving the parking lot project when we were looking at budgeting? Yes. Yeah, so then that would definitely affect things here, because right now we want to put the playground is going basically like in dirt. So like the way the park is, there's like this, you know, how you guys all know how it is, like so in order to put the playground right here, looks like we were planting grass pops from the picture. So we could push it back so it wasn't in the way of the foul balls. But if we were talking about saving these funds and putting them towards something else, then I don't know if we even, yeah, I guess I don't know where people are going to park then if we end up putting the playground in the spot where people park now. I mean, there's a lot of parking on the road, but still everyone knows everyone parks in the grass and all over the place in that park right now. So that would be my only concern.
Yeah, I was
Have the money.
I was saying where the basketball court is, not where the parking lot is. Right there.
Right.
Yeah, and even if we were to put it there, that's still where people are parking
It's
now,
still-
right?
right.
Yeah.
People just pull in everywhere over there.
And I think we're exploring this specifically because the playground is in such disrepair that it would be something that would be a high line item for us. And so I think the reason why the parking lot has come up in our 30-year capital budget planning is that, well, it's kind of one of those things that has to be tied together, but you know, we can either move the playground based on the capital planning and keep the parking lot as it is, or do the parking lot at the same time. So,
Because my other question would be, you know, like moving playground equipment is not ideal. Because I know when the school, like that whole thing, when that school was being torn down and we wanted to save the equipment, but then once it's like placed in location, then like liability and I don't know if it like something changes. So I would hate to like just move it 200 feet or what, you know, like lose that insurance or whatever that would change. So that makes me question that as well. I know you're saying number 3 you would suggest, but that's where I'm just trying to think of everything here.
Jesse's
Mr.
sneaking
Chair,
in here.
I just want to clarify, we wouldn't be relocating the existing playground. We would just be placing because we're replacing it in the capital budget 2024. So we're planning for a new playground with that. We just really are looking for direction on where to place it. So we can place it in the proposed spot here with the new equipment. The old equipment would end up getting recycled, as we typically do with these replacement projects.
Right.
I'm sorry, you said that this is in this year's budget.
The playground replacement is correct.
Okay.
We had, I believe, $80,000 budgeted towards that, and then the Lions Club has contributed an additional amount of money towards it as well.
How much?
I believe they're up to, I think they put in 30, and they were going to contribute another, I believe, 40, but that's not confirmed.
The only concern I have with the wording here is, and I'm not against the inclusive layout or the surface. My kids and I use the South Campus playground a lot as we wait for my son to get done for baseball. Seems to be a nightly occurrence. Well, maybe not now since it's under snow. That stuff makes me a little nervous. Having stepped on it, there's a cost to that, and it's not small, because you step on it and there's give to it. There's the length and longevity of that makes me a little nervous. It also very hard to clean, I'm finding out. they have a problem with some pine needles over there. It just kind of digs into it. So that would be my concern with it. The other thing too is that for us, in terms of inclusive playgrounds, Bain Park is ideal for that. We already have a flat ground area with parking, with a actual excessive baseball field as well. So that in terms of inclusive playgrounds, I'd almost like to see us focus our energy towards making one area more inclusive. This is, not to be rude, but this is in a bunch of sand. And from what we have talked about, there wasn't a goal to have it be a paved parking lot. So it's not going to be a very excessive playground to begin with, no matter where we go with it. So I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just saying I think there's a lot more cost to that than just, hey, we should not use wood chips. I think we're going to have to look at that a little bit more, because having stepped on that one over there, there's cost to that. The second your foot goes on it, that's money. So.
And I'll clarify, I prefaced our first conversation with the Lions Club very quickly with that shrinks the scope of the work quite a bit if you're looking at some kind of surface like that.
Yeah, it's got to be expensive. I don't think we've ever looked at it, have we, in terms of for an actual playground. So that would be my only concern with that part of it. That he did pull it up here because I was looking at it. It is quite a bit further back to that pavilion than it looked like on the initial drawing. It is sloped a little bit, but that doesn't mean that we can't deal with that slope. It's not excessively sloped, but there is a little slope there from the pavilion coming down to that road.
Are we saying we want to put it where it says City of Brainerd? That's like, or are we, it's not exactly to scale, obviously.
It's definitely not to scale, is what I was basically saying.
Yeah.
No,
So you're
there's-
thinking,
So the master plan shows it roughly right behind the building there.
In between
And that
them.
the back corner of that building is roughly 30 to 40 feet beyond the foul line.
oh, behind that building, like that little hut.
Yes.
Yes, the master plan
Back
shows
in
it
the
right
middle of
behind
the
that.
Drive there.
Yeah.
Why don't we just leave it where it's at? Yeah. Why don't we just put the new one where the old one is then?
I mean, I think because when we were planning, we weren't going to put a pickleball court in the middle right there. But, I mean, we can obviously change our plans. This isn't set in stone.
Andrew?
Yeah, I guess just thinking about the budget side of things, I like option 3 a lot in that we want to do this. We want to partner with the Lions. They're contributing, I think, a significant amount of money. And so let's get that partnership right instead of doing something right now. And I know in the past they had mentioned there were grants they could apply for. So let's give them time to get those rounded out. If we find some too, that's good. And then Troy, I think you have good concerns about the exact location of the playground. I think where it is on the master plan makes a lot of sense. If it's 10 feet farther back, if we plant a couple of trees where foul balls are likely to come from, I think there's ways we can protect that.
That helps, yeah. And, maybe 80% of the girls don't hit it that hard, but 20% do, I guarantee you. They'll hit foul balls that far and farther. So,
Yeah, but I think I would like us to continue to execute on the master plan we came up with. I think we liked it at the time and we put a lot of effort in to make sure it made sense. And so if we need to request, I think it was 40,000, Jesse, for doing the gravel in a different spot next year.
That's roughly what I would estimate to do the new gravel parking lot and then reseed the rest of it back to grass.
but perhaps even the configuration of the playground could be laid out differently than what it's shown on here. And you know what I mean? It doesn't have to look exactly like that. It can be set in there a little different and
Yeah, and I think, right, knowing that the Lions want to add on in the future, maybe, right, we build it farther away and say, if you want to grow it, you're going to grow it towards the baseball area, but knowing you need to plant trees or, right, a shade structure that would catch a
good idea.
Or have, yes, the certain equipment that would be, keep the kids unhindered from any sort of foul ball sort of thing.
So you said 40 grand for the parking lot?
Roughly.
Does that
For
include-
for a gravel parking
Or
lot.
gravel parking lot? Because I think, if I remember correctly, we had some kind of connector from that small piece, that straight line going to the pavilion. I don't remember that being, I want to say that was impervious.
I have to go.
Yeah, I think now that you're saying that, it was like a little sidewalk there.
Do you know when we have that in the capital budget?
We don't currently have it in the capital
okay.
budget, so
Just-
that's kind of part of this
Gonna
discussion.
get spicy for you. That's 2025. You know how those rules work. It don't go well. It's a smaller amount, but it don't go well. That's next year.
Jesse, it was in our capital list. It wasn't set to be, I can pull it up.
That sidewalk, you mean? Oh, the parking lot. Yeah, I thought it was in there, but that's why I brought it up, because I thought we were nixing it.
Thanks, Troy.
Bye, Troy.
Good night, sir.
We did actually have it set 2025.
How much?
We could have changed it in our last meeting.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we've met a couple of times for
Yeah.
capital planning, so,
You guys have a
yeah,
special
so.
committee, like,
Sadly, I don't carry that in my back pocket.
You don't have the pocket budget plan?
No, not currently.
Yeah, you're gonna wanna get acquainted.
So do we need a motion here then? Is that right? Is that what it says here, correct?
I would like some direction from the park board, which of these options or an alternative option, which would you like us to do?
I would move to do option 3, and I think specifically dedicate our budget towards play structures and not accessible surfaces.
Is the,
I'll
before-
second that.
Okay, yeah, and a comment from me, I mean, is the Lions portion of this contingent on accessibility?
They haven't made that statement. What their goals of this new playground was to make it an inclusive playground. I'll make that statement.
Okay. Other comments or concerns? I think then at that point, we just want to make sure that we reach out to the Lions and let them know that this is the direction we'd like to take, so their portion of the money initially would be probably more for accessibility upgrades and inclusivity upgrades, and our money would be spent on the equipment. Dave?
Yeah, and I want to make sure that we're being clear about this, is that the city wants to follow ADA in all ways possible. And I'm talking about it going above that, just in terms of, we've talked about this before, each one of our parks is very different, and each one of our parks will have different accessibility needs and different accessibility ratings, if you will. This is a hard park to get accessibility into in terms of a playground, just because of the nature of where it's located and what it is. It's very wooded. It's a very highly sand covered area. So it's not that the city in any way is against it, just that it brings up a lot more than just, hey, we'd like to do it. You know, the cost will be substantially increased, and it isn't necessarily the best layout for it as well, so.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments on the motion?
I do agree with Dave though, because it's all sand over there, so I think they would just have to know that. And I think once we dug in, they would realize that, like, it might not be the best idea to not use wood chips or whatever, so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and our plan is just to, the playground needs to be replaced, period. So, again, make that comment to them that, we are replacing it. We don't necessarily have to do it here. If they want to put their money somewhere else that could potentially be more inclusive, and get a little bit better bang for their buck, we're open to that as well. But, since we're already doing it, if they want to explore that option with us while we make these adjustments, that's totally fine. So,
We just really want some swings at that park.
get some swings, yeah.
That is one thing that everyone says all the time. We need swings. Anyways,
All righty, so motion is second. Any further discussion on the motion?
Just for
Yes.
clarification, that is to relook at the location as well, right? That was a part of that motion?
Yeah, option 3 is
Option
what we
3
got
we're
going on.
looking
Yeah, we're gonna,
We'll kick it a
Investigate
year
where the-
and
Yeah.
look at the location.
Okay,
and
perfect.
Inclusivity as well as the comments from the park board.
perfect. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. We are configuring. All right, now we're moving on to the approval of the YMCA and ISD 181 agreements for the 2024 youth programs. Jesse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. These are similar agreements to last year. The only two major change, or the only major change that we put in here is the previous agreements had that quarterly reporting requirement. We took that out and we put in here the twice annual presentation to the park board from each of those groups. One before the season talking about the upcoming programming, as well as one in the fall that recaps their summer programming, as well as including a request that fall presentation includes a budget request for the following year. So that was the major change of this. Other than that, it's basically the same agreement as previous years.
Perfect. Any comments on the agreement?
It's, I think, what didn't go super well last year, but on the whole, I think it went really well. So.
Yep, I like a before and after, so that's very good. Any other discussion on the agreement?
I'd like to make a motion to approve these two contracts for 2025.
Second.
All right, 2024, okay, perfect. All right. Okay, a motion and a second to approve these agreements for 2024. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed, same sign. We have an agreement. And moving on to the BBBA agreement for the 2024 season. Jesse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This agreement is actually the same agreement basically as last year. This does allow them to utilize our maintenance equipment to help groom and maintain the fields, especially during like tournaments and stuff like that, where we don't necessarily have the staff available. And this helps save them costs from us having to put a full-time employee into it. So we do provide some additional training, and our maintenance staff does work with them as well to show them how to use these things. But this takes the liability off of us for them using our equipment.
Very good. Thank you, Jesse.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We have an agreement. Moving on to the Mills Field Storage Shed. Jesse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the 2024 capital plan, we had $3,000 towards the demolition of the Mills Field storage shed that's kind of behind the outfield there. The exterior is starting to look pretty rough. In evaluating this before we got too far, we started looking at the utilities and what it would take to get that all squared away. Found out that there's a lot of power that goes both in and out of that building. Which would cost us quite a bit of expense to rerun some of those lines to make sure that whatever is going in and out of that building isn't obviously shut off. We have used the building for storage in the past. Something that we could do is, if you're interested in it, we could utilize those $3,000 towards rehabilitating the exterior. Obviously, the interior is in pretty decent shape, so we could go towards that route rather than continuing through demolition. Most likely, the $3,000 wouldn't cover the funds that we would need to reconfigure the electrical.
Thank you, Jesse. Comments on the shed, Mr. Mayor?
We're sure this is the same building. We're positive that you've taken pictures of the correct shed. There's no way.
It's not the Taj Mahal one.
Hey,
could be the
have you
Taj
seen the
Mahal.
outside of this building?
Yes, yeah.
That's what it looks like on the inside?
Yes, sir.
What are we doing tearing that down? Look at that thing. That is an impeccable, beautiful building.
Yeah, immaculate.
Look,
yeah.
look at, have you seen that building?
I have seen the exterior
No way
of that
that's
building.
the building
yes.
that I have put my hands upon from the outside. There's no way. I don't believe it.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, very nice structure.
Inside.
Yeah, on the inside, yeah.
Blown. Mind blown.
Move to approve using the $3,000 to do anything to make the outside of the building look better.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion to rehab the building instead of tearing it down? Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, what would we use this for? So we're clearly putting a few things in there, but what can we use this for? Because if we're going to rehab it, let's make sure we can do something.
They store just different materials and equipment for Millsfield specifically in here. Not necessarily like a mower or anything like that, but like you said, you can see a couple things in there. So we do use it for the storage for that field specifically.
Okay.
What's that black thing in there?
Blood tires or?
What?
That looks like a screen for, like a pitching screen is what that looks like,
Okay.
minus the actual screen.
Yeah, I mean, because the alternative is spending a ton of money to tear it down.
Right, and
So,
it's like really solid building.
Yeah, so for like heads up as to where, this used to be where the BMX track was. So all that electrical is most likely for the lights and stuff that were used for that, so.
Sorry, there's a BMX track?
Oh, yeah, this is where the BMX track was. Oh, that's a long, so you want to get in a long story of how we moved the BMX track outside of the city? We took the one activity,
no.
the one activity that children on bicycles can get to and moved it to where children on bicycles cannot get to. No, it's a fantastic facility outside the city now.
very good.
Very on brand for like past Brainerd. Okay.
Well, we still have a motion and a second. Do you have any further comments? Anyone? Discussion? All in favor of spending $3,000 to just rehab the building instead of demolish it, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. We are rehabbing. And finally, the event application for the skate park spring session. Jesse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Attached to the item is the application from the Skate Park Association to do a spring session, kind of a pop-up skate park, booth, lessons for kids. They included a map of the area of the parking lot that they're looking to reserve for that Saturday, April 27th from 11 to 3. We included some conditions in the attached application, including insurance, requesting traffic controls, traffic control materials 1 week prior, and then that they would remove all the signs and everything else after the event's concluded.
Very good. Any comments on the event application? I like that it's in Memorial, since that's where we want to put the park, have the skate park. So seems like a great venue.
So it doesn't look like they're actually going to do alcohol or food trucks, or am I misunderstanding with that?
Amplified
Check.
sound?
What? Oh, is it just for amplified sound? Is that all that?
That was my guess.
Correct. No, there's nothing about food or
Okay, okay.
beverages included in the application, so my assumption is that there wasn't
Right.
planning to be any.
I think the question was why it was not in the consent calendar and why we had a separate item for it.
It was applied for as an event
Okay. Sure.
rather than like a pavilion reservation.
Gotcha. Yep.
So as an event, I kept it as a separate item.
Very good. That clears that up for you, right?
To approve the permit for the skate park event.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on the event application? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. We got an event. What do we got next? We're on to staff reports?
Public forum.
Public forum, okay. This is a time for citizens to bring matters not on the agenda to the attention of the board. So we will open the public forum at 5:29. And seeing no one, we will also close the public forum at 5:29 and move on to staff reports.
So the Easter egg hunt is this Saturday at 10 a.m. sharp in Gregory Park. We have partnered with Rotary to help us with that event. We also have the Easter ball hunt, which is all ready to go, and that will be around Boom Lake, and the dog park. Our adult sports are all up for registration. Our men's leagues are down a little bit for registration for this year, but our co-ed and women's are doing pretty good. Pickleball is up more than these numbers as of today. Early Bird Tournament is our men's softball tournament, and that also still only has 3 out of 10 teams, but food and beverages will be provided by the Brainerd's Eagle Club. Still getting donations in. I think we're up to 15 different local businesses that have donated to our Parks and Rec events. We also obtained another AED from Essential Health, so we will be placing that in one of our parks. And we have also started hiring for umpires, concession stands, and the recreation intern.
Did the fees for softball go up this year?
Nope, the fees stayed the same as last year. So MS1 and MS2, the men's league is $1,050, and then women's and co-rec is $710.
What is the temperature on that then? I mean, you've been in. I've seen you been in the forums and stuff in the groups. Any reason for the slow start? Any comments from the public that we're hearing back that they're not just hopping on registration right away, or just kind of?
So one change that we did put in effect this year is that with registration, all fees are due at time of registration instead of a $300 deposit. And then rest paid later, just because we were having problems with getting completed payments. So I think that is probably the main reason why we're a little bit behind. A lot of people haven't had problems with it. I think also with just me starting in January, the registration was late in general, so for them to get money from their sponsors. But we're now open to new teams, so we've had a few new teams this year.
Very good. Yeah, that's kind of was my thought on it too, but I hadn't, again, taken the temperature of that. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just highlighting a few different things on the project side. ARPA projects, we just had a couple small revisions on those plans, detail-wise. So once we get those revisions back, we'll get that thing out in bid. Buster Park Pavilion, we got a price on the concrete footings. We'll get that installed as soon as we don't have a foot of snow on the ground and we can install concrete footings. Disc golf course is still progressing, working with the group there to finalize the budget, get some quotes squared away. Lum Park maintenance building did come down. If you haven't been out there, it is no longer there. They still have to dig out the footings and stuff like that, but the building has been demolished as of now. So moving that process forward. Talked about a lot of the other pieces. Mills Field fencing, the relocation, so the maintenance staff was able to get it all down and removed. The thought was that Oberg fence was going to get started last week. They had to postpone for a week, and obviously they're not getting that started today or the next couple days. So I would anticipate as soon as the weather permits and the snow is gone that they'll start installing more of that fence. And with that, would like to introduce our new city administrator, Nick. He only chooses to come to the park board meetings that don't have 12 items on the agenda. So I wanted to make sure I put less on this one so he could be here.
Well, even though we had, 7, it still ended up being a touch longer than anyone anticipated. But again, nice to have you, Nick, at one of these.
Welcome.
Anything else, Jesse, on the report? Anything, Nick, you'd maybe like to?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know I'm the one standing between everybody in the door now, but I've been in place for about a month. I don't think I've had the opportunity to meet you. I look forward to getting to know all of you better. I grew up in Fergus Falls. I'm a retired military officer. I retired about 12 years ago. Did a few things since I retired, but glad to be back to Minnesota. And yeah, I've heard there's been some interesting conversations in Park Board recently, so I'm looking forward to get involved with what's going on here. So,
Yeah, it is probably subjectively the best board or commission in the city. So happy to have you. So we will move on to board member reports, and I think for me, genuinely, well, now that there's a foot of snow, changes a little bit, but I think again. As far as the contract and things like that are concerned, I continue to say, regardless of outcome, I do feel like we've done an immense job. maybe with the more hands-on approach and trying to negotiate, working with folks, and we've got a lot of feedback and just the positivity that these discussions have brought, whether or not we were able to come to some sort of agreement or put something forth and approve it remains to be seen, obviously. But I do feel, and a lot of the community does feel, that we've put together, at least a very solid plan and a very solid attempt to make this work. So I am actually very proud in the work that we've done, and really appreciate the kind words a lot of people have sent to me and about the process. So otherwise, yeah, I honestly really like, again, as I was mentioning to Haley prior to the meeting, I really appreciate all the donation work and all the sponsorship work that's been done. I really feel confident that we'll be able to straighten out our concessions issues this year. Is certainly a hope of mine. So I do feel like we're really on track with that, and I really like seeing that sort of progress. And again, you haven't had a lot of time, so I really appreciate the amount of work and the amount of progress that you've made in that amount of time. So.
So Jesse and John and I have been working on a 30-year capital plan, and I think we're making really good progress in being able to. So I think last year we really kind of demonstrated everything in our park system and how much of it is maybe not in the shape we would like it to be in, or the maintenance state we would like it to be in. And so with this capital plan, we're going to kind of have 3 buckets to work from. We're going to have our 2% maintenance. We're going to have things that we as a board think we need to catch up on. So there are things that are maybe coming up that aren't funded but are in a rough enough shape that we want to be thinking about it so we don't spring a giant Memorial softball lights situation on anyone. And then there's things that we think need to be immediately funded. So an example of that is the Buffalo Hills parking lot, right? This is something we want to move up. It lines up with our priorities. And then we can really have those 3 buckets of discussion with the council that, hey, as a board, we think, right, we want to keep funding things to maintain and repair them. We want to start getting caught up on things, negotiate on those if it doesn't make sense in a given budget year. And then here's the immediate things that, right, we want to move this parking lot ahead because it ties in with the playground replacement, and we can have a kind of a complete project. So I think probably April we can look at that, unless April is jam-packed again. But I think you probably want it sooner than later, Jesse. So, yeah, really good progress on that. I'm excited to share it with everyone when we're done.
My only thing, well, besides all the stuff you guys said too, is Haley, I was wondering about the banners. So we talked in the past about banners. We haven't really talked with you about banners, but are you doing banner sales this year for like the softball fields and dog park and all that?
So this week I'm in the process of going through all of that documents to determine if we are doing again. I did find a majority of the banners in a storage shed, so I know we still have them. But I'm still working on if we will be doing it this year.
Okay. So I would just be curious, I don't know if notes and stuff from last year, we kind of talked about maybe trying to make them more branded, like all the same size, or maybe we get them all from the same place. I know that Jonathan had talked with some vendors or a vendor and maybe said we could work something out. I'm not trying to steal your thunder here, but I just thought of it because I would think pretty soon here we'd be hanging those banners. So, maybe could you fill her in what we're kind of thinking about from last year, Jesse? Or do we have notes on that? Do we really talk about it?
We had some discussion at some of the meetings. That was one of the tasks that I put Haley on a couple of weeks ago, was to start wrapping her head around the Memorial Banner Program. Obviously, the higher priority was to getting the summer activity registrations open and stuff like that. So this was kind of the next thing is, hey, start wrapping your head around the program that we have currently, and then we need to start chatting about those details of what that looks like in the future, and then working with the park board to kind of craft the future of it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just think we were just wanting them to look, just to have them look similar across the board and have them look really clean, but still give that opportunity, because I know we make decent money with that, or the program, the softball program does, but just so cool. I'm glad that you already looked into that. Maybe we can have it on April's agenda. I don't know.
Yeah, just making, I mean, and again, I do feel really confident in your strategy so far. So just like, having that cohesive sponsorship strategy, I think banners tie into that, of course. So, like I said, I did a little bit of independent work on this as well, but, again, I received, talked to First Impression Printing about it and Lakes Printing about it. So, they're, and I wouldn't say incredibly well versed, but those companies have at least had my contact and were very willing to put forth some sort of effort or quote based on whatever design standards you'd like to put together for those types of sponsors. So,
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that as well, and just in that, I think it's something we can do differently. I think there's a more efficient way of running that. But I do think it's good. I think it's good for us to be looking at that, not just for softball, but for our other activities in other areas as well. We got a lot of fence. So we got plenty of areas where that type of stuff can go. But I do think there's a more efficient way of doing it than the ways we've been doing it in the past. And I appreciate fresh eyes on that. So next to note, I just wanted to make one request for you, Jesse. I see that under the parks ARPA projects, you said staff has received the final plans. Can we get those sent out? Have we taken a look at those at all?
Yes, we brought them up a couple months ago, I believe.
The final ones, though?
I think the only difference between that one and this one is the tree protection detail. So we talked about the tree over at the beach. The plans, the final plans, they indicated a tree protection detail that included like snow fence, and it was pretty elaborate. I think just a note in the plans that says protect the tree should be sufficient, but they really have not changed since
Okay,
that time.
I just want to make sure, because if there is anything, I just want to make sure this group has it. I know that the council is anxious on that project, so we'd like to get that squared away.
I can send out the final plans anyway.
Perfect. I think it's a great idea. That way everybody's on board and we all know where we're at with that. So, secondly, I had to switch hats. Community Action got a request from the Parks Department for some events to take place. And we'll be tipping our cap at you and nodding. And I think we've got a little partnership we can do that will involve some movies. Can I announce that? Is that okay? Some movies at Lyman P. White Park. So a combination of Community Action and the Parks Department, trying to figure out what that might look like. I don't know what the funding will look like in terms, but it should hopefully be something that is easily done. So I'll be contacting you. How about that? A public way of telling you privately. I'll be contacting you about that. But I think it's a great thing to talk about in that, we talk about butts and seats all the time, and what a great park that's been created and trying to find new ways. And I just wanted to kind of tip my cap towards Haley and the Parks Department and say thank you for looking at something different. And I think we're going to come to a cool way of doing that. Maybe just a couple, but I think it'll be cool. So thank you.
yeah, like I said, love the creative events and all those sort of ideas initially. Just we haven't, as a city, don't do that much. I mean, we leave it to a lot of other groups. Obviously, we do have Easter egg hunts and other things, but when you think of the city putting on these events, it's not really us. It's a lot of different other groups that put on the bigger events of the year. So,
Well, in events, and I say this all the time, events do not necessarily mean massive events.
Right.
Massive events are a lot of undertaking. What can we do for families? What can we do for the local family that's right down the street that wants something to do in our park that we can do some low-hanging fruit for? And I think that's, the more stuff we can do like that, the better. And I'm excited to see something like that come through. So,
radical. I think we'll be looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.